What's up, my comic comrades? Before I dive into today's episode, I want to share an app with you guys that I've been using for quite some time now, and that I think will be useful for all my fellow comic book fans. It's called the Key Collector Comics app. This awesome app already boasts a catalog of over 17,000 rare and key issues out of the 1 million comics that have been published since 1934. For instance, if you go to the title search and type in Batman, it's going to give you all the key and important issues that's ever been published in the Batman title. We're talking about first appearances, first mentions of places like Arkham, or even just rare variant covers. And you could do the same thing for the character search. If you type in Spider-Man, it's going to show you every key and significant issue Spider-Man has ever been in. Whether it's the first time Spidey fought Green Goblin or the issue where Spider-Man revealed his identity to Black Cat. There's also a tab called Spec Deck that speculates on comics that could potentially be worth good money in the months or years to come. That way you could buy them now when they're still cheap and then watch the value grow. Same thing goes for the Hotkeys tab. It lets you know what key issues are shooting up in price. Basically, it's a comic collector's dream, but whether you're a comic expert or a novice, this app is amazing. As I like to say, you can become a comic book expert in the time it takes you to download this app, as you'll have all the information right there at your fingertips. The Key Collector app has way more features, but if you want to check it out, download it on iOS or Android and use the promo code Arris to unlock the app's full features for a free week. It's a little harder to find the promo code option on iOS, but you find it by clicking on the Key Collector Welcome tab inside the app, then type in Arris and you'll get a free week. And if you decide to keep it, every month after that is only $1.99, which is less than a single comic book. Or you could buy it for a year for just $19.99. So if you choose that option, you're essentially getting 2 months out of the year for free. Regardless, go unlock the full app for free with the code Arris, and if you like it, keep it, and if you don't, get rid of it. That's okay too. I just wanted to share it with you guys as it's an app that I use all the time, and I think it could help a lot of you with your collecting and just overall comic book knowledge. Anyway, this coming Tuesday, the highly anticipated Disney Plus streaming service officially launches everywhere. And in addition to nearly every Disney-owned movie and TV show ever made, Disney's new platform is introducing a serious lineup of brand new original content, including one of the shows we're most excited for, and the first live-action Star Wars TV series ever produced, The Mandalorian, which will be available right at launch. In fact, we'll be getting the first 2 episodes this coming week, with episode 2 going live on Friday, November 15th. It's not surprising at all that Disney and Lucasfilm would partner with Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni to create a Star Wars series based on a Mandalorian bounty hunter. After all, Boba Fett has been a fan-favorite character since his brief appearances in The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. But who are the Mandalorians? Where did they come from? What makes them such formidable fighters? And what is their beef with the Jedi? Well, the answers to those questions can be quite lengthy and complicated, depending on whether you incorporate legends or not. But whether you're talking about Star Wars legends or canon, Mandalorian lore dates back thousands of years to a time even before the Old Republic. So today we're going to give you a few key points about Mandalorian history, mostly what we know from canon, but with a little bit of legend sprinkled in for depth and context. Let's start with who they are and where they came from. According to what we know from canon, the Mandalorians are a warrior race who settled on the planet they called Mandalore, long before the formation of the Old Republic. They chose the name Mandalore after their leader, Mandalore I. But Legends gives us more detail regarding the Mandalorian origin. According to Legends lore, the Mandalorians derive from an ancient race called the Tong, who were forced to flee their original homeworld, the planet that would eventually become known as Coruscant, after being defeated in battle by their rival nation called the Gel. The Tong would roam the galaxy for a while and would eventually conquer and settle on a jungle planet in the Outer Rim, which they again named after their warlord leader, Mandalore I. Over time, the Mandalorians gained a reputation as highly skilled and brutal warriors turned mercenaries who were feared throughout the galaxy. Survival and conquest through war was essentially their way of life, and that led to the emergence of the Mandalorian faction known as the Crusaders, who began attacking and conquering systems and worlds beyond their own in order to expand the Mandalorian Empire. But when their reign of terror and war reached the Inner Rim, it brought them into direct conflict with the Old Republic and its new group of mystical guardians known as the Jedi Order. Yes, this is where the long, unpleasant history with the Jedi began. After the first confrontations with the Jedi Knights, the Mandalorians were left stunned by their use of what they saw as magical powers, as they had no knowledge of the Force at that point. That being the case, the powers and abilities the Force granted the Jedi left the Mandalorians with a serious disadvantage. However, the warrior and cunning nature of the Mandalorians drove them to devise new advanced weapons, techniques, fighting styles, and strategies that would allow them to stand toe-to-toe with the powerful Force-wielding Jedi. This includes the development of their now infamous Mandalorian armor with their T-shaped visor helmets, and was also loaded with anti-Jedi weapons like magnetized boots, jetpacks, and wrist-mounted sonic repulsors meant to mimic the Jedi's force push. With the development and mastering of these new technologies and weapons, the Mandalorians began to not only hold their own against the Jedi, but defeat them in a number of confrontations, which immediately served to strengthen the feared reputation of the Mandalorians, as they became the only warriors capable of confronting and defeating Jedi Knights. The conflict between the Jedi and the Mandalorians would last for generations, and solidify a hatred that lasted for thousands of years, all the way through the Clone Wars. Ultimately, the clashes between the Mandalorians and the Jedi Order became legendary throughout the galaxy. However, despite all the war and hatred between the Mandalorians and the Jedi, a moment of peace did emerge when a prominent Mandalorian named Tar Vizsla from the powerful House of Vizsla became the first Mandalorian child to possess Force sensitivity, and ultimately became a member of the Jedi Order himself, even creating a unique lightsaber for himself called the Darksaber. This made Vizsla a highly respected and revered leader among his people, and he eventually became the Mandalore, the sole ruler of the Mandalorians. His Darksaber itself also became a symbol of power and strength long after his reign. In fact, after Tar Vizsla's death, the Jedi recovered his Darksaber and returned it to the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, only to have members of the House of Vizsla infiltrate the temple and return the Darksaber to Mandalore, where it was used to unite all the houses and clans throughout their territory. But that unity wouldn't last, as the old warrior mentality of the Mandalorians began to manifest itself again, with warlords from several Mandalorian clans rising up to not only revive the war against the Jedi, but also against each other. The endless conflict grew increasingly worse until it finally led to a final battle between the Mandalorians and the Jedi that was so severe that it completely devastated the planet Mandalore, scorching most of its surface and leaving it an uninhabitable white desert. While this did end the long-running war with the Jedi, it left the remaining Mandalorian people to completely rebuild their home. Some clans chose to leave the planet to instead occupy other worlds within the Mandalorian sector of the Outer Rim, but the rest decided to instead adapt to their homeworld's new condition by building sealed dome cities, including the capital city of Sundari. The centuries that followed saw the Mandalorians break out into civil war between two major factions: those who wanted to return Mandalore to its conquering warrior roots, and the pacifist ideology of the new Mandalorians, who favored diplomacy and non-violence over militaristic aggression. In the end, the new Mandalorians came out victorious, and a new government focused on neutrality and non-violence was implemented and led by Duchess Satine Kryze, with the remaining warrior clans being exiled to the Mandalorian moon called Concordia. Over time, the Concordian governor Pre Vizsla rebuilt an army in secret, based on the old Mandalorian war mentality, which became known as Death Watch. This group would of course go on to partner with Darth Tyrannus, also known as Count Dooku, and the Sith uprising to conspire against the new Mandalorian government and the Galactic Republic, which of course would trigger a series of events that would ultimately lead to the Clone Wars, the fall of the Republic, and the Imperial forces occupying Mandalore. The rest, as they say, is history, but I will also note that it was during the Clone Wars when we were introduced to the Mandalorian bounty hunter Jango Fett. And while most Star Wars fans knew him as a Mandalorian for many years, in the Clone Wars animated series, he was denounced by Mandalorian leadership as a pretender, a simple bounty hunter who found or stole his Mandalorian armor. With that seeming in-canon revelation, that would mean that Boba Fett, as Jango Fett's clone, would not be a Mandalorian either. This doesn't make either character any less cool, but it has been a point of debate and controversy among Star Wars fans ever since. But that wraps up our look at the key highlights of Mandalorian history. We can't wait to see what Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni add to the mythos of these awesome characters, especially considering how big of a role Filoni has already played in defining Mandalorian canon in the Star Wars universe through the Clone Wars and Rebels animated series. So we'll be watching as soon as it drops, and then be right back here to give you an initial spoiler-free review and then a full discussion breakdown on the podcast. Let us know what you're most looking forward to from The Mandalorian in the comments down below. And that's going to bring another episode of Variant to a close, but if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out that one right here. And if you like our channel, be sure to subscribe and like. It helps out the channel. But I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things comics.